Welcome to Season 4 of Lawyers with Game. Today's special guest is Brandon Etheridge, Senior Vice President and General Counsel from the Baltimore Ravens. We're going to talk about the NFL and some of our favorite video games of all time. Stay tuned. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Lawyers with Game. I'm your host, Darius Gambino. I am first and foremost a lifelong gamer. I've played on just about every console from the original Atari to the Sega Genesis to now the PlayStation 5. I'm also an intellectual property attorney with over 20 years of experience advising clients on issues related to patents, trademarks, and copyrights. I'm with the firm of Saul, Ewing in Philadelphia, and you can find me on the PlayStation Network under gamertag EaglesFan71. With me today, a very special guest, Senior Vice President and General Counsel from the Baltimore Ravens, Brandon Etheridge. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
If you like these videos, please like and subscribe so we can continue making them. And please keep in mind that this video is intended to be a casual and very general discussion of legal issues. It is not intended as actual legal advice. If you need actual legal advice, please reach out to us and we'll be happy to help you. So Brandon, today we're going to talk about the NFL. We are in the midst of the preseason right now. The regular season is about to kick off. I'm sure we're going to get into the Super Bowl preview that's going to happen on December 1st between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Baltimore Ravens. But before that, I wanted to ask you about your path to your current role. You've been with the Ravens for about 8 years now. Can you talk a little bit about your transition from leaving law school and some of the positions that you held prior to coming to the Ravens and what you're doing at the Ravens today?
Sure. And Darius, thanks again for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. As you mentioned, I have spent the past 8 years here in Baltimore with the Ravens, what I consider to be my hometown team. I was born in Baltimore, but split my childhood between Prince George's County in Maryland, so I'd say probably more of a suburb of D.C., and Columbia, Maryland, which is much more of a suburb of Baltimore. I grew up, as I said, in Maryland, in the general area. My high school, actually, so middle school and high school, were 10 minutes away from our current practice facility in Owings Mills. So it's been quite a trip for the last 8 years to drive to work, essentially taking the same route that my school bus took for 9 years from the time I started going to the McDonough School in Owings Mills, Maryland in fourth grade until the time that I graduated. So quite a trip. And actually on that note, our original training facility was built in 2004. And the Ravens moved here, or it's the Browns moved here and became the Ravens in the mid to late 90s, as I think you all know. And so that's quite a bit of time to spend without a practice facility. And before the current facility known as the Counsel was built, we actually used to practice in inclement weather over at my middle school, high school. So I remember growing up and going to McDonough and sneaking down between classes when we'd hear, even when you'd see snow or rain, we'd run down to the field house just to try to get a glimpse of Ed Reed or Ray Lewis, Peter Bulwer, John Ogden, one of those guys down lifting in our weight room, obviously lifting a lot more weights than any of us could lift at that point, or even now, to be honest. But I always, even back to my McDonough days, I always just had a love and a passion for sports. I played just about every sport you can imagine growing up. I played soccer, I played basketball, I played baseball. Came to football a little late. I started playing football in the 8th grade, played my freshman year of high school, and then actually took a few years of a break and then picked football back up again my senior year of high school. And at that point, started getting recruited by Yale University to come play football there. Took an official visit, and I fell in love. So I committed to Yale very early on in the process, got in I think early decision, early action. I'm not sure what they call it now, but went to Yale to play football. And so I played 3 years there. Suffered an injury in the spring of my junior year that essentially ended my playing career. But I never kind of lost that bug for the game. I grew up. I mean, I know this is right, lawyers with game, and we'll probably get into video games that we grew up playing or still play later. But I actually, in preparation for the podcast today, I was trying to give myself some inspiration. And I went on Spotify and looked up like the Madden '04 soundtrack, which I still think is one of the best soundtracks of all time, let alone like a video game soundtrack. I think when I was playing in college, most of the songs on that soundtrack made their way to my warm up mix. But I just never lost that bug or that just hankering or yearning kind of to be involved with the game. I mean, once I was finished playing, I missed the locker room, right? I missed the grass. I missed walking around on game day. I missed knowing it was game day, right? And just how different that is. I'm sure for those listening who may work for publicly traded companies, I'm sure earnings announcement day is a huge deal. But I will still take game day any day of the week. There's just something extra special about it. And that's the case I've learned over the last 8 years or so, is the case just as much when you're playing as when you're not. I get just as excited for game day now as I used to. But decided to go to law school, went to law school, got into Harvard, started at Harvard in September of 2008. Thought I was interested in constitutional law, was interested in civil rights law. But again, I just couldn't help escape this passion that I had for sports. I mean, no matter what I did, when I wasn't studying in that 1L year, as we all know, there's quite a bit of reading that you have to get used to in your 1L year. When I wasn't reading for law school, I was watching ESPN. I was looking at the ESPN app. I was watching the NCAA tournament or watching NFL games, NBA games, MLB. I mean, whatever sports that I could really watch. And it became apparent to me that no matter how hard I tried, even though I thought, hey, I'm done with sports because my career as an athlete is over, I just could not shake it. And my my second year at Harvard, I was looking through the course catalog and just saw 2 courses taught by an incredible guy, mentor of mine by the name of Peter Carfagna, who is essentially, I think, basically the Nick Saban of sports lawyers. I think there's quite a few, I put it in the double digits of team or league lawyers who studied under Professor Carfagna at Harvard. The GCs of the Commanders, of the 49ers, I think the deputy GC of the Raiders, the former GC of the Seahawks, who's now, I think, the general counsel of the National Hot Rod Association. We all kind of have some sort of connection. And so several of those people studied under Professor Carfagna, but all of us studied together or worked together at Covington. But I saw those courses and I just, I was like, wait a minute, you can combine sports with law? That's crazy. That's game, set, match right there, right? I mean, it's interesting, and I do a lot of talks and give a lot of talks at Baltimore City, especially elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, and I do that because just from my own experience. I mean, I think it's difficult for kids to dream about something that they don't know about, right? And kids do have exposure to the Madden football games right now, and now NCAA right is back, and those sorts of games. So kids, get exposed to the field, right? They understand the coach, they understand players, right? They even probably understand announcers and scouts. But what you don't see, and what I never knew, and when I was growing up, was everything that was taking place behind the scenes. The idea that there are 71,000 people that come to Ravens games, and all those people need to get in. Well, how do they get in? Well, they need tickets, right? And so the sale administration of tickets, as you and I have worked on, Darius, right? I mean, that in order to, right, like the NFL is a big business. A lot of money's being made, especially at the team, and at the team level. What that usually translates into is sponsorship and marketing rights. So whether you're talking about naming rights of the stadium, naming rights for a field, whether you're talking about various assets, LED signage, static signage. I mean, whatever the case may be, there's a whole world kind of operating behind the scenes of a game. I think a lot of people probably that probably first came to a lot of people's kind of forefront, right, of their minds during the pandemic when all of a sudden, you're used to having 71,000 fans on a game day. Those fans are showing up, right? You're selling concessions, you're selling merchandise. Those people are parking, they're buying tickets, and all of a sudden, I think most of the games during that 2000 season, we weren't even allowed to have fans. I think there was one game where we would have 250 friends and family, another game where we were able to have, I think, 5,000. But other than that, it was empty. I mean, everything. The only way you could consume kind of the NFL over that time period was by watching on television. But my first kind of understanding that there was this whole world behind, right, this game behind the game, was when I took a history of the major professional sports leagues with Professor Carfagna up at Harvard Law School and I'd say, I guess that was 2000, the fall of 2009, and that completely opened my world to this universe of the business of sports. And while this was specifically, right, like the antitrust foundations and labor foundations of sports as we know them today, especially NHL, MLB, NBA, NFL, it was just incredibly exciting to me. And so from that point forward, I kind of said, you know what, this is what I want to do. I want to marry sports with the law, right? Sports being my passion, law being my chosen profession. And so I eyed law firms coming out of my second year of law school who really had a focus in sports. And that was around the time, as you'll remember, right, where Paul Tagliabue, the former commissioner, had just retired, and Commissioner Goodell was first starting to take over. And I read up on Commissioner Tagliabue and saw that he had started his career at Covington, and that he was going back to Covington around that same time. And to me, I kind of said to myself, what better way to get involved in the sports world than by going to work at the same firm as the commissioner of the NFL. So that's really what took me to Covington, and really what I would say was the launch of my career in sports.
That's great. I'm really glad that you brought up the behind the scenes aspect, because I get a lot of questions. Well, how do I get involved in esports and video games, right? A lot of people believe that you can just be a player, right? But there's so much more behind the scenes, including legal and including a lot of other things.
There absolutely is. Absolutely. I mean, and that's, I think, an important piece for kids to know about, is that, you may play, right? Like you may play video games that are right, where what you're seeing are, right, like you're playing Madden, you're learning how to play this game of football. I know my former college teammate, Mike McDaniel, who's the current head coach of the Miami Dolphins. I know Mike has given a number of interviews where he just talked about, they're like, where did this genius kind of come from, right? These guys like Sean McVay and Mike McDaniel, Kyle Shanahan, like, where did this come from? And so many of them talk about Madden, right? Like they're like, I learned the game by playing Madden, and just drawing up plays and think about interesting ways to, right, do the same thing out of multiple formations and trick the defense, get an advantage. But when I go and talk to these kids at schools, and this happens, I mean, there's elementary school, middle school, high school, college, even some grad schools. I mean, people, I think once you tell someone in college or grad school these jobs exist, they get it. But at least in the beginning, when you kind of say to them, hey, we're a business. I mean, we're a limited partnership. Like, some of us are limited partnerships, some of us are LLCs. We have accountants like everyone else. We have
Right.
payroll, right? We have to pay people. We have
Right.
vendors that we have to pay, right? We have law firms that we have to pay, right? So we have accounts payable. We have a security team. We have lawyers. We have human resources professionals. We have operations folks. We have equipment managers. We have team doctors. We have athletic trainers. So there's so many, I'd say, professions that you just don't know about that sports teams, sports leagues need. And they really provide, I think, a way for former athletes who just still want to stay involved in the game, still love that competitive element and aspect of working for a team, being part of a team, to stay in the sports world even after their career ends. And then, I think for fans, right, if you just, you didn't play football and you just grew up as an avid fan, whether it was of a specific team, specific player, or you're just a fan of the league in general, right? These types of jobs just give you a way to have a career in the NFL without ever putting on shoulder pads, putting on a helmet, getting hit, catching a touchdown, running for a first down, anything like that. And you're right, they're safer too. I think the worst injury that I've gotten in my 8 years as a team lawyer is a paper cut. And I've had a longer career than it's interesting. You see the 53-man roster that and the people who make an NFL roster at the end of preseason, right? We talked about we're in the midst of preseason right now. We just lost our first preseason game in devastating, heartbreaking fashion to the Philadelphia Eagles, actually, in one of the crazier finishes that I can remember to a game, preseason or otherwise. But you have 90 players in camp for every single team right now. And I think a lot of people don't realize that, when you cut down to that 53, right, that's a lot of people losing those jobs.
Right.
It's an incredibly competitive business. And I think it's still the case that the average NFL career is 3 years. And so I like to say, despite never putting on shoulder pads in the NFL or, a helmet or taking a hit or catching a touchdown or throwing for one, I've had a 10-year NFL career. And that's pretty exciting. Between my 2 years at the NFL league office after I left Covington and my 8 years at the Ravens, I've to be able to say that I've been involved in the NFL for 10 years is pretty special and exciting. And I'd like to think that even though my younger self, right, my 10, 12-year-old self who loved playing Madden, I'd like to think that kid would still be pretty excited about, the fact that I've been with the Ravens for 8 years in the NFL, for 2 before that, even though I'm not playing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of something else that's exciting, you were recently named to the Sports Business Journal's 40 under 40 list. For those of our listeners that don't know, the Sports Business Journal is the journal and newsletter and magazine for the sports industry. So, can you talk about that process? And is there anything, any kind of awards or anything that you're going to be going to for that?
Thank you for that, and I appreciate that. I think it's a testament, really, to, and I'll say this: that Sports Business Journal is a wonderful publication. They do a lot of incredible work, and when you just thumb through, a Sports Business Journal publication, you just see just how much innovation is happening in the sports world. How teams are really, I think, especially in this day and age, all looking for, our next phase of fans, right? The next generation of fans. How do we engage them better? People have a lot of things that they could spend their time doing. I think especially now we talk about, right, you talk about X and you talk about Instagram, you talk about Snapchat. A lot of people are able to consume a lot of information and content, right? People always talk about content being king. There's a lot of content out there. People don't necessarily have to come to an NFL game to get their content fixed, right? They can turn on Apple TV, they can turn on Hulu, Netflix, whatever the case would be. Now Netflix, right, is getting involved in live sports. And I know one of the games that they're hosting this year on the Netflix platform is going to be the Ravens-Texans Christmas Day game. So shameless plug for that one. But I think what Sports Business Journal has done has really highlight these efforts by NFL teams to create new experiences, innovative experiences for the next generation of fans. And I think what a lot of teams are learning is that the days of a lot of fans just wanting to come to a game and just sit in their seat and just watch and consume the game the entire time, that's not really what we're seeing a lot out of fans these days. I mean, really, I think especially younger fans are looking for the ability when they attend these games to socialize with friends, right? Like that's one of the biggest things people are looking for. And so over the past few years, I've been very excited to be involved in a number of really cool projects. And I know thank you, Darius, personally for your help with us on our naming rights deal that we did together a few years ago. But in 2023, the Ravens agreed to it's an extension of our lease at M&T Bank Stadium. So our previous lease was going to expire, I believe, after the 2027 season. We engaged our partners at the Maryland Stadium Authority on a lease extension, ultimately agreed to one. As part of that lease extension that now takes us, the Ravens will be here at least until 2038. There's 2 5-year options on the back end of that lease that could take us to 2048. But as part of that, the state committed to investing up to $600 million in the state-owned M&T Bank Stadium. And I think a significant portion of that money is going to go toward improving the fan experience. And so this past off season, when you come down to watch your Eagles lose in the regular season to us in early December, you'll see a few of those activations and new experiences that we've been able to complete for the 2024 season. We've got a multiple story beer hall that we've constructed on the east side of our stadium. We built new premium suites. Next year, we are building end zone suites so that you can have that premium experience just from the end zone, be field level and experience the game that way. We have new field seats that we put in so that fans can experience the game that way. And next year, those field seats will enter into a North Club and a South Club at the stadium with inclusive food and beverage. The South Club will actually have visibility to the player tunnel, so fans who are having some drinks and having some food before the game can interact with their favorite players for the game. But those are projects that I was heavily involved along with our team president Sashi Brown in the negotiation of our lease. Once we negotiated that new lease and secured that public funding for our projects, right? When we started talking to M&T Bank about an extension of our naming rights agreement and came to you for help. And so, between the lease, the naming rights, and then some of those other premium projects that we're spinning up, I think Sports Business Journal has just recognized that over time, lawyers in the sports business have been able to contribute a lot more to business operations than I think previously thought, right? I mean, this idea that lawyers just redline agreements, negotiate contracts, that is, I think, that is a thing of the past. I mean, we are nowadays, and I don't know a single NFL club lawyer who would say different. Nowadays we are heavily involved in the strategic operation of our teams. When it comes to key business initiatives, across the organization, lawyers are playing a significant role in those. And so what I'm most happy about the Sports Business Journal 40 Under 40 awards is that they're now recognizing the contributions that lawyers are making to the business of sports, right? And to the sports world. I was happy not to be the only lawyer chosen. Cyrus Gavi at the league office was also chosen, as was Kalisha Stewart, who is an attorney for the Cowboys. So as proud as I am of the individual honor, I'm also just proud of the other lawyers who made that list. There is a gala in November. We all will get an award. I think mercifully we're spared of giving speeches. I think they have these 30 under 30. I think maybe you can get away with a few speeches, but 40 under 40 I think is a few too many to have everyone give a speech. So we'll just go there, accept an award that I'm really proud of. and then just keep doing the good work.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I'm glad that you brought up the way people consume content too, because that's something I find I'm always talking about with other people. Is I just use my own son as an example. He's 18, and he does not want to sit down and watch an entire football game. Because there's red zone and because there's other things and other ways to consume that content. So I think teams need to have the foresight that you have to invest money in different ways to keep fans engaged, especially younger fans.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to ask you about some of your charitable work. So there is an organization called, I believe, the Baltimore Community Foundation, and they work with lots of different organizations within the Baltimore community. You personally set up a fund that is intended to help the youth of Baltimore. Can you talk a little bit about that and what types of things that you're doing with that fund?
Thank you, Darius, for the opportunity to talk about Baltimore Community Foundation, which does some work that is really near and dear to my heart. I mean, one of the reasons that I joined the Baltimore Community Foundation, I joined the board in March of 2019. I joined the organization because I think sometimes it can be very difficult, just as a citizen, to know where you can put your dollars that will make the most impact, but also where you can put your dollars in terms of finding organizations that will actually use your dollars to address whatever societal ills that you want to focus on, right? I mean, where you're contributing dollars that are not just going toward hosting fancy galas, but that are also that are really going toward, right, like feeding the elderly or making sure children have proper heating and air conditioning, improving transportation, mental health resources, whatever the case may be. I was intrigued by Baltimore Community Foundation because this was an organization that is able to go to people and say, whether you want to set up a fund through us or whether or not you just want to contribute to our general fund or to a specific organization, we'll go out, we'll find good organizations that are well run, that will commit to making sure that your contributions go to the people who need it most. And so I was thrilled to join the board, which is also comprised of a real who's who of leaders in the Baltimore business and civic community. And over time, I mean, it's just been incredible. I mean, one of the things that I really like about Baltimore Community Foundation is because it doesn't have a mission statement tied to a specific cause. It's really able to respond to the needs of the community as they arise. When I joined, there was a significant push toward criminal justice reform, into funding organizations that are fighting efforts to what we'll call, right, criminalization of poverty. Right, 2020 hits, and all of a sudden, we're in COVID, and Baltimore Community Foundation kind of shifted its efforts toward, okay, the digital divide and making sure that kids in Baltimore City had access to laptops and internet, right, so that they could do virtual learning. All the way to, right, I mean, in 2021, 2022, I joined BCF's COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy task force, right, where we were identifying organizations that were working in communities in Baltimore on vaccine hesitancy. And over the recent years, there's been a huge focus in terms of gun violence and gun and violence prevention. For me, when I set up my fund there, it was I grew up, I think, understanding that there are not sufficient resources in a lot of Baltimore City, such Baltimore City schools and just elsewhere. For mental health services for youth. And so I kind of said, this is something that's very near and dear to my heart. And that was going to be my focus. And so over the years, my fund has contributed mostly to organizations that are trying to address mental health issues for youth in Baltimore. And One of the organizations that I'm most proud of partnering with is called Roca, where they take. I think the best way to probably put it is that they take kids who have essentially been forgotten by a lot of the system, kids who I think a lot of people have written off, those who are I think identified as most likely to become victims of gun violence or to become perpetrators of gun violence. And Roca employs a number of just very dedicated folks violence interveners, who will go to these kids' houses, find them, bring them to Roca, and using cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, just teach them different ways to of conflict resolution. Kind of as a way to, right? So it's using it's using mental health and addressing violence and trying to kind of work on violence prevention through and viewing it through a mental health lens, which I think is just something that's really needed, not just in the Baltimore community, but a lot of communities around the country. But I've loved BCF for the ability, right? I mean, during COVID, they actually, the name of the fund was the Evolving Needs Fund, and so what I loved about that is kind of the same approach I think the Ravens take to philanthropy, which is, rather than just kind of get locked in on what we think the community needs, let's go to the community itself. Let the members of that community tell us what they need, and then see how we can leverage our platform or use our resources, which we've been blessed to have plenty, to help the community address the needs that they see. And so I think Baltimore Community Foundation just does incredible work in that regard. And I've just been proud of everything they've done, proud of the entire staff there. And I hope to continue doing this work for many years to come.
Yeah, no, that's great work. And like you say, not just Baltimore, but every city in the country has some of these same problems, and they all need that support. Well, we touched on it a little bit before, but we were going to talk about video games. You mentioned the 2004 Madden soundtrack. So what are some of your favorite games of all time? And by the way, we're in the midst of the Madden 25 being released while we're recording this. So what are some of your favorite games of all time? And if there's anything you're playing right now, maybe talk about that.
So I would have to say, and this is probably the line of question I was most excited about getting into, but I would have to say that my favorite video game franchise of all time is Assassin's Creed. I think the last one that I really played consistently was Black Flag, but I also played the Assassin's Creed that was based on the American Revolution as well. The attention to detail in those games, right, and constructing these ancient cities, in kind of tying in historical events, right, because we've all read history, right, and historians can make 100 years just fly by and just kind of glaze over the massive events. But I think for a lot of people who are interested in history, like myself, you're like, there's probably so much kind of subtext what's going on, right, and there's just ordinary activity going on during those times. And so I've loved, the Assassin's Creed that was, like I said, during the American Revolution, loved it. There's Assassin's Creed Syndicate I played, which was based, I think, during Victorian England. And then Black Flag, I believe, was the one. It was, you're essentially like a pirate assassin. And so, right. You're just traveling around the Caribbean, kind of interacting with kind of these legendary pirate captains and all that. So I'd say probably the last 10 years, that's been my favorite. In college, I'd say, we spent a lot of time, of course, when we weren't studying, playing Halo, and Call of Duty, was really big into Modern Warfare in law school, when we weren't studying, of course. And just going back to the night, I was a huge Sonic the Hedgehog fan. So had the Sega Genesis, everything. Had the Nintendo 64 too, but Sonic Hedgehog was just a big favorite of mine. But mentioned Madden, mentioned NCAA. I think I was actually in NCAA football 2K5, I believe. Like they finally put the Division I AA, as they were known at the time, schools in there. So, it was, I don't think a lot of people played with us. I think I played with us once and, put us up against Alabama, and that did not go up very well. But those are some of my favorite games. And growing up, I just absolutely loved video games. I just think it's an incredible way. Especially right with the Assassin's Creed games, to be able to loop in some history to those and just have an enjoyable time.
I'm gonna have to go and find that 2K5 now because I booted up NCAA 25 the other day, or college football 25 as it's called now, and I went to see if Yale was in there, and they're not, unfortunately, not in the current one. But I'm gonna have to find that.
That's all right. I'm sure there'll be some sort of plug-in eventually that'll allow them to be in there. But it's also, it's just incredible to me to pull up these old games that I used to play, and right, just like when you're watching television, right, and you just look and you're just like, how did I ever think that these graphics were incredible? When you look at what graphics are now, and and then you just start thinking, what's it going to be 20 years from now? What's the history of video games, 20 years from now? But it is, I please do. And if you feel like writing an angry letter saying we need more inclusion of some college programs in it, I will co-sign.
Yeah. So you mentioned the graphics, right? Like, I had so many hours of enjoyment with Tecmo Bowl on the NES, right? Because really, that was the only thing that you had at the time that had the real teams and the real players in it. And that was all anyone wanted, was to play with the real teams and the real players. And when I go back and I look at Tecmo Bowl now, and, it's still enjoyable, but like that versus Madden, it's amazing how far.
We're like, NBA, right? NBA Jam.
Yeah.
I used to play that at the arcade. And think, wow, this is the coolest thing ever. And now you look at, 2K, and you're just like, you put a picture of those guys up next to their image in the game, and some of them, you're like, this is pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's really amazing how far we've come. And I feel what you're saying about Assassin's Creed as well. The open world, the attention to detail. I think the one that's coming out this year is going to focus on Japan and maybe the transition.
Yes, I think it's feudal Japan.
Yep. Yeah. So I might get that one. Which is
going to be really cool. It's going to be really cool.
Yeah.
And I like how they, I really do like how they rather than creating a whole new, like history, right? Like, in making this complete fiction, how they'll take historical events and say, well, what if there was a subplot to that the historians didn't quite catch, and let's make sure the gameplay, right, like meshes with historical events as we actually know them to have happened. I just think the amount of effort that has to go into that, right, into learning the history and learning the times, and then fleshing out these historical, right, like fleshing out these characters, right, where you're taking real life people who actually existed, and then creating these characters to fit into those universes is incredible. The amount of, I talked earlier, right, about how people don't realize the behind the scenes work that goes into the production of NFL game, right? I'm sure you could do a year's worth of podcasts just on the behind the scenes of these video games.
Absolutely. Well, last question for you, Brandon. What is on the horizon for you personally and for the Ravens over the next year, other than the big showdown on December 1st? What are you looking forward to over the next year?
I'm really looking forward to these new premium products. I'm looking forward to seeing how fans react to our efforts to kind of meet them where they are, right, and provide more interesting experiences at the stadium. Looking forward to seeing how people are enjoying the field seats and the view from those seats. Looking forward to the launch of our end zone suites next year. Looking forward to walking into a Ravens game day, and hopefully you can join us the December one, walking into that new beer hall we have and seeing fans kind of enjoying that. And, with that, right, with these new premium spaces we're building, there's just going to be so many more opportunities to activate the stadium year round. We really do think that despite kind of some of these other massive stadiums that are going up and the ones that are being built, you're thinking about, SoFi and Mercedes-Benz Stadium down in Atlanta. And then look at some of the ones that are being built over the next few years, the Bills Stadium being built, the Titans Stadium being built. We still think that our stadium can compete with anyone. And we look forward just to having more opportunities to highlight that. And so having these new premium spaces, the ability to attract more events beyond just the 10 games that we have a year, I think will be really exciting. We just hosted a soccer champions tour preseason match between Barcelona and AC Milan at the stadium the other day. And so that was the first opportunity for a lot of fans to see some of our new projects that we've put out there and that we've been a part of. So it's just going to be an exciting time. And we lost some key pieces of our team last year and lost some great coaches, but we also reloaded nicely. And I think a lot of people in Baltimore are looking forward to seeing what Derrick Henry can do in the backfield with Lamar Jackson. I think even for that stout Eagles front, that's going to be a tough read option for the Eagles front to deal with. But I know that'll, as always, a Philly-Baltimore game in December, that's going to be a hard-hitting affair and fun.
It's going to be a great matchup, and I really hope I can make it down there for it. Well, that's all the time that we have for today. If you have any questions about any of the topics that we've raised, please drop them into the comments. We'll do our best to answer them without providing any real legal advice, of course. Thank you, Brandon Etheridge, Senior VP and General Counsel at the Ravens, for coming on and for your time today.
Absolutely, Darius. Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun. And, if anyone has suggestions on other open world games that would be cool for me to try, please let me know.
Sounds good. Okay, well, we'll see you next time on Lawyers with Game.